It's the Resistance Report, February 17th, 2017. We're coming to the end of the fourth week of the Trump administration. Doesn't it seem like it's been going on forever? Only 4 weeks. Scott Pruitt, who was until recently Attorney General of Oklahoma and spent the last 6 years suing the Environmental Protection Agency, ostensibly on behalf of Oklahoma, but actually on behalf of the oil and gas industry, of which Scott Pruitt was a puppet. He was in their pockets. He is now the director of the Environmental Protection Agency, the administrator of the EPA, and presumably he's going to now try to gut environmental rules, preserving waterways and wetlands, cutting pollution from power plants, raising vehicle fuel standards, reducing mercury pollution. He's going to try to get rid of all of that, water it down, make sure that it is not in the way of the oil and gas and other polluting industries. He'll also, I'm afraid, try to pull the United States out of the Paris Accords. Now, remember, he has spent the last 6 years as Attorney General of Oklahoma suing the Environmental Protection Agency. Attorneys General do have standing to sue the EPA. And so I am assuming and I am hoping that the Attorneys General of California and Washington and Oregon and New York and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Vermont and many, many other Attorneys General will now start suing Scott Pruitt for stopping these necessary environmental rules and regulations. He should be handed a little bit of the medicine that he has perfected or at least used, and hopefully he will not get very far. Now, I don't really profess to understand Donald Trump's economic theories. In fact, I don't think there is an economic theory. I heard him today at a rally in South Carolina at a Boeing plant try to hold forth about his America First economics. And it made absolutely no sense. He gave a speech at that South Carolina Boeing facility where the new 787 Dreamliner, Boeing's Dreamliner, is being unveiled. He said it was built right here in South Carolina. And he also said that our goal as a nation must be to rely less on imports and more on products made here in the USA. The USA. He said he'd lower taxes on corporations and he would get rid of regulations, as Scott Pruitt, his new EPA administrator, is trying to do. And by lowering taxes and getting rid of regulations, at least this is what Trump believes apparently, he will make it easier to create jobs in the United States, and that companies like Boeing will prevail. Boeing as a model. Well, it is all fantasy. First of all, Boeing got to South Carolina because it abrogated its labor union agreements. It undercut unions. It wanted to get away from its high-wage employees in the state of Washington. That's why it went to South Carolina in the first place. But it's also important to know that almost a third of the Dreamliner components that go into making the Boeing Dreamliner there in South Carolina come not from the United States. They come from other nations. And by the way, these are not nations that have low corporate taxes or low regulations. These are nations that actually have high taxes and high regulations, and they have good wages. And these are nations that have strong unions. They have excellent schools, including technical education. These are nations that have universally available health care. The center fuselage of the plane, the whole center body of the plane, comes from the Italian firm Alenia Aeronautica, not from the United States. The landing gear system comes from the French firm Messier Doughty. The main cabin lighting and other facilities in the main cabin come from the German firm Dial Luftfahrt Elektronik. The access doors and other special safety equipment come from the Swedish firm Saab Aerostructures. The parts for laboratories, flight deck interiors, galleys, they all come from the Japanese company Jamco. The electrical power conversion system comes from the French firm Thales. The system's lithium batteries come from the Japanese firm Yuasa. And I could go on and on. You get the point. These are not low-wage, non-union, low-regulation countries with workforces that are working for peanuts. No, these are high-wage, unionized workforces in countries that have very strong safety nets and are investing like mad in education and healthcare and job training and technical skills, which may be, in fact, is why these workforces are very well prepared to make these critical parts of the Boeing Dreamliner. Oh, and by the way, the first delivery of the Boeing Dreamliner is going to take place next year. Scheduled for next year. It goes to, not the United States, not to American companies, it goes to Singapore Airlines. And currently there are 149 other orders from worldwide customers, including British Airways and Air France. In other words, contrary to Donald Trump, this is not an America First effort. The Boeing Dreamliner is made all over the world and will be sold all over the world. Donald Trump's America First economics, in other words, is total demagoguery. The only way we get a first-class workforce that can do all of this by itself, or even more of it by itself with regard to any other products and related services, is by investing in our workforce, in their education, in their job training, in the infrastructure that connects them up, in their health care. We don't get an America First workforce by xenophobic grandstanding, such as Donald Trump did today. By the way, speaking of grandstanding, this morning Trump escalated his attack on our free press. I'm going to read you the tweet because, frankly, it is unprecedented. Quote, "The fake news, in capital letters, media, the failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy, it's the enemy of the American people!" Exclamation point. That was Donald Trump's tweet this morning. The enemy of the American people. Now, even if most Americans understand that for a president of the United States to call the media of the United States the enemy of the American people is not just unprecedented, but it is delusional and it is dangerous. Nevertheless, there are going to be some Americans who are becoming persuaded by Donald Trump's ever more strident attacks on the press that he's right. And the result is to undermine the independence of the press in our society, making who? Making Donald Trump the ultimate arbiter of the truth. This is not only irresponsible and delusional, this is seriously dangerous and unconstitutional for a president of the United States to call our nation's press the enemy of the people. Last night, the Republican Party and Trump's campaign together, the websites posted a 25-question survey, so-called, called the Mainstream Media Accountability Survey, asking Do you believe that the mainstream media has reported unfairly on our movement? Unquote. And asking whether the survey taker believes that MSNBC, CNN, etc. report fairly on Trump's presidency. The survey actually formalizes Trump's attacks and his continued insinuation that media outlets in the United States are working against the American people just because they're criticizing Donald Trump, just because they are telling the truth about what has happened with regard to, for example, Michael Pence, Michael Flynn, the lies told by Flynn to Pence, the intelligence reports that Trump and his associates before and after the election were in almost continuous contact with Russian operatives at a time when Russian operatives were interfering in the United States election on behalf of Trump. Now, if you fill out that survey that I just mentioned, you're taken to a donation page that states, President Trump is asking you to go the extra mile and make a contribution to help defend our movement from the outrageous attacks from the media coming our way. Contribute now to help us fight back against the media's attacks and deceptions. I want to ask you something. Where are the Republican leaders standing up to this unprecedented tyranny? Do they have no concern for our democracy? For the constitutional protection of the freedom of the press? Do they put party ahead of our nation in such a bizarre and blatant way? Where are the Republican leaders? Today, this morning, I had a conversation with an old friend of mine who happens to be a former Republican member of Congress. I asked him, what's going on? Where are the Republicans? What do they think of Trump? He said, oh, well, a lot of them think that Trump is weird, delusional, unhinged. I said, well, what are they going to do about it? He said, nothing. None of them wants to be the first mover. None of them wants to stand up and risk having Trump tweet against them and maybe having some of Trump's followers be angry and aggressive toward them in their home districts. And then I said, well, why not have them join together, have a joint statement? We have to have a select committee of Congress to probe what's going on here. And he said, no, they don't want to do that because Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and Michael Pence would much rather get the Republican agenda through. While everybody is concerned about Trump's crazy, irresponsible tweets, they can slide their tax-cutting agenda, their repeal of Obamacare, their other attempts to maybe destroy Medicare, certainly cut Medicaid, undermine Social Security. They can all get all that done quietly while the attention is focused on this madman in the White House. I said that makes no sense because the craziness we're getting from the White House is eventually going to catch up with them. They're going to be bulldozed if they don't get out in front of this. And my friend, the former Republican member of Congress, he laughed. And he said, well, maybe that's right. We're coming up to a weekend. It's called President's Weekend. If you don't see the irony in that, I will not spell it out, but let me just say that we now have as President of the United States, someone calling the media the enemy of America, someone who may be seriously compromised in terms of Russia and Putin, somebody who may not be entirely, completely sane. President's Day weekend is a time to celebrate our presidents. I truly wish I could find something to celebrate about Donald Trump. I will celebrate the memory of all our past presidents. I will celebrate those who are still alive preceding Donald Trump, including many Republican presidents, some of whom I actually worked with and for. But I will not celebrate this president. I hope you have a good weekend. This ends tonight's Resistance Report. I'll see you next week.